Have you ever had this creeping feeling that you're, well, on paper at least, doing absolutely everything you're supposed to be doing?
Oh, yeah. Constantly.
Right. Like you're paying your bills on time, you're maintaining a relatively healthy diet, showing up to work, just checking off all the boxes of being a responsible adult.
The whole functioning member of society routine.
Exactly. But your daily experience still feels somehow, I don't know, hollow. Like there's this phantom puzzle piece missing from the very center of the board. And no matter how much you optimize your morning routine, you just can't seem to find it.
It is, I mean, it's arguably the defining condition of modern life, right?
Mm.
We spend massive amounts of energy optimizing our daily schedules and our productivity.
Yeah.
But we rarely step back to optimize our underlying philosophy. Like, we totally fail to define what a full life actually consists of, mechanically speaking.
Well, welcome to the deep dive, because our mission today is to tackle that exact problem for you. We're exploring a really profound, highly structured philosophical roadmap designed to help you achieve a truly full life.
It's a fascinating one, too.
It really is. We're pulling this from a text called The Three Elements of a Full Life by Su Feng. And the author argues that a genuinely full life requires exactly three foundational elements: health, wealth, and freedom.
Right.
But the text doesn't just stop at broad platitudes. It breaks each of these down into this really rigid 3 by 3 matrix.
And I think we need to point out how the author lays out the stakes here, because there's a surprising level of bluntness right from the opening pages.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't hold back at all.
Not at all.
Yeah.
This is not presented as like casual self-help or a gentle suggestion. The text argues that if you are missing even a single one of the sub-elements we're about to discuss, your life fundamentally becomes, and to quote the text directly here, broken, tragic, and full of regret.
Broken, tragic, and full of regret. I mean, that's a zero tolerance policy for missing pieces.
Truly.
So to avoid that incredibly bleak fate, we have to start at the absolute foundation. The text refers to this as the first blessing, which is health. And I really want to get into the imagery used here because the author presents health not as a goal, but as the strict prerequisite for simply getting into the arena of life.
Yeah, the metaphors the text uses are incredibly vivid. It states that a barren mountain cannot grow large trees, a broken ship cannot sail,
Right.
and a weak body simply cannot handle the dramatic, inevitable ups and downs of joy and sorrow that life just throws at us.
You need health just to endure the emotional whiplash of being human.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the author pushes far beyond just the standard definition of, physical fitness. They divide health into three distinct, interdependent levels.
Okay, so the first level is physiological health. That's the baseline, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maintained by health regimens, diet, and exercise. But then the author introduces mental or psychological health. And the text claims this is maintained by the teachings of sages. And I really want to unpack the mechanism here because, how do the teachings of ancient philosophers or sages practically maintain mental health?
And the text argues that sages essentially provide the operational manuals for human psychology.
Okay.
Think about how our brains function as these raw reaction machines. If someone insults you, your physiological hardware immediately wants to trigger a fight or flight response.
No, absolutely. My heart rate spikes immediately.
Right. So the teachings of sages, whether we're talking about Stoic philosophy, Eastern mindfulness practices, or just deeply ingrained emotional intelligence, they act as the cognitive algorithms that interrupt that raw reaction.
I see.
They regulate the raw heat of human emotion and convert it into productive forward motion, rather than just a destructive explosion.
So if physiological health is the hardware of a car, like
Yeah.
the transmission, the cooling system, the physical engine block, then mental health, informed by these sages, is the ignition system.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
It's the specific mechanism that translates potential energy into actual directed momentum.
Yeah, that car analogy is actually really central to the text's explanation. The physical body is the machinery. The mental health is the spark that gets the machinery moving.
But then there's the third level.
Right. Where the philosophy takes a really fascinating turn is this third level, which is spiritual health. The text states that spiritual health is maintained by correct faith or beliefs. And in the context of our car metaphor, this is defined as the actual fuel.
See, this is where I found myself pausing. Because, wait, according to this framework, you could have a perfectly tuned physical engine. You could have a flawless mental ignition system. Like, you're physically fit and cognitively sharp.
Right. You're doing the workout, you're going to therapy.
Exactly. But without the fuel of spiritual health and correct belief, You are essentially just a lifeless heap of metal sitting in the driveway. Like, what does the author actually mean by correct faith acting as fuel?
So it's less about dogmatic religious adherence and more about the structural integrity of your core beliefs.
Okay.
Correct faith, in this context, means a belief system that actually sustains you. It's the underlying conviction that your actions have meaning.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, if you don't fundamentally believe that your life has a purpose or that your forward motion matters, your physical and mental machinery has literally no reason to operate. You might go through the motions, but the engine is running on fumes.
Wow.
The spiritual belief is the combustible material that gives the machinery its purpose and animation.
Man, we spend so much time polishing the car's exterior and checking the spark plugs, totally forgetting to put gas in the tank by figuring out what we actually believe in.
Yeah, it's a huge blind spot.
But okay, a healthy body and mind are just potential. You can have a fully fueled car sitting in the driveway, but without resources to hit the road, you're going nowhere. Which brings us to how Xie Feng argues we fundamentally misunderstand the concept of resources.
Which introduces the second blessing of the text, and that is wealth. Now, the author's view on poverty is unflinchingly pragmatic here.
Very blunt again.
Very. The text states plainly that poverty causes misery and pain, describing a poor life as inherently tragic and bitter. Wealth is positioned not as a luxury, but as the necessary vehicle to realize your dreams.
Right.
However, just like health, wealth is expanded into three distinct dimensions, forcing us to redefine what a resource actually is.
So the first dimension is material wealth, which is pretty straightforward. It's basic survival, having enough food, reliable clothing, and shelter. Just the absence of that gnawing panic about how to pay the rent.
Exactly.
But then the text pivots to mental or psychological wealth, and it defines this as possessing knowledge, having a solid circle of friends and family, and possessing a mental home.
Yes, that concept of the mental home is arguably one of the most powerful ideas in the entire text.
I am completely fascinated by it because we are so conditioned to only track our wealth in bank accounts or investment portfolios. But this philosophy elevates having a safe harbor for your mind to the exact same level of importance as paying your mortgage. How does a mental home actually function as a form of wealth?
Well, think of wealth as a buffer against the harshness of the world. Material wealth buffers you against physical starvation, right?
Right.
Well, a mental home buffers you against psychological collapse. It's a psychological sanctuary. Maybe it's a specific relationship, a deep passion, or a community where your mind can retreat when the external world becomes chaotic or hostile.
That is so true.
The text is literally categorizing human connection and intellectual safety as a hard currency. If you have millions of dollars but no mental home, you are, according to this matrix, completely impoverished.
You're bankrupt in the mental dimension. And the text pushes this even further with the third tier, which is spiritual wealth. This is defined as having strong ideals, possessing an optimistic drive, and using a very poetic phrase from the source, having a blue sky for the soul to fly.
It is a beautiful image, isn't it?
Yeah.
The blue sky represents this vast, unencumbered, expansive potential. It's the psychological resource of hope.
Right.
If you have material survival and a mental home, but you look at the future and see only a low gray ceiling of despair, you lack spiritual wealth. The blue sky is the optimism that allows you to envision a future worth moving toward.
I see the poetry in that, I really do. But I kind of want to challenge the distinction here. If wealth is about having a blue sky to fly in, how is that any different from simply being free? Like, if my soul is flying in a blue sky, it feels like those concepts blur together completely.
That's a great point, and the text actually anticipates that exact confusion.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Think of it structurally. Having the blue sky, that vast, expansive optimism and potential, that is your wealth. That's the resource itself. But that beautiful blue sky is entirely useless to you if you are locked inside a cage and not allowed to fly in it.
Oh, I see.
The sky exists, your optimism exists, but you have no access to it. You possess the resource, but lack the agency to utilize it.
Which introduces the crucial third piece of the puzzle, the third blessing.
Freedom. The text warns that without freedom, you are living what it calls a prisoner's life. Even if you are healthy and wealthy, a lack of freedom dooms you to never find your true self. You become merely an accessory, a tool, or a decoration for someone else's life.
Becoming a decoration for someone else? Man, that is a chilling way to describe a life.
It really is.
And I noticed the text splits freedom into 3 levels as well, starting with physical freedom, which is the obvious one, the right to move, to have personal space, to be free from the physical interference of others, basically not being in a literal cell.
Right. But then it moves to mental or psychological freedom.
Yeah.
And the author defines this as the right to freely absorb knowledge, to choose your friends, to speak your mind, and to choose your beliefs.
You know, we often assume we already possess mental freedom just because we live in a modern society. But do we really?
That's the question.
Like, when you look at how social media algorithms curate the knowledge we absorb, or how social pressure dictates what we feel comfortable speaking out loud, it feels like we're often placed in invisible mental cages that dictate our beliefs for us.
Exactly. We willingly trade our mental freedom for social comfort. And that brings us to the final point of the Matrix, which is spiritual freedom.
Huh.
The text defines this as freedom from dogmatic doctrines. It's the ability to let your mind roam completely free in vast spaces without any fear, imagining things as beautifully as you want.
See, imagining things as beautifully as you want. The inclusion of the word fear there is so revealing to me.
Oh, completely.
It highlights the tragedy of self-censorship. Like, we might physically leave a toxic job or finally walk away from a terrible relationship, but we keep the mental shackles firmly in place. We don't allow ourselves to imagine a genuinely beautiful outcome for our lives because we've been so deeply conditioned by the fear of disappointment. We just stay in the cage even when the door is standing wide open, completely ignoring the blue sky above us.
We literally become our own wardens. So if we look at the complete architecture of this philosophy, we have a 3x3 matrix: health, wealth, and freedom. And within each, a physical, mental, and spiritual dimension. 9 distinct, perfectly balanced elements required for a full life.
Okay, I have to be honest with you. Looking at all 9 of these elements laid out together, it sounds completely exhausting.
It is a lot.
Right, like keeping your physical hardware tuned, your mental ignition firing, your spiritual fuel topped off, while simultaneously maintaining a mental home, an optimistic blue sky, and fighting off the invisible cages of fear. It feels practically impossible to balance all of that at once. How does the author expect any normal human being to actually achieve this?
Well, the author actually leans into that exact sense of overwhelm. The text acknowledges that achieving this full life is simultaneously extremely easy and incredibly difficult.
Helpful.
Right. But the determining factor, the mechanism that flips the switch from impossible to possible, is not about working harder. It is purely about our consciousness and our ability to actively shift it.
Okay, shifting our consciousness sounds a bit abstract. What does that actually look like when you're just trying to survive a Tuesday?
So the philosophy is deeply grounded in reality here. It points out that human existence contains 18 unmanageable aspects.
18.
18. These are massive, immovable forces that we have absolutely zero control over. The primary example the text uses is the weather. If heaven decides it's going to rain, it rains. You cannot negotiate with a thunderstorm.
And it extends beyond just nature, right? Because the text talks about how we can't always control the system or other people's rules. It uses this phrase about having to drink the soup. Like sometimes you're forced by external structures to just follow the crowd and drink the bitter soup that society puts in front of you.
Exactly. You're operating within institutions, surrounded by other people's deeply flawed decisions. You cannot brute force your way out of those 18 unmanageables.
I can definitely relate to that. I mean, I try to maintain my perfect matrix of health and wealth, but then I get stuck in an hour of horrific gridlock traffic.
Right.
And other drivers on the interstate probably account for about 17 of those unmanageables. In those moments, my consciousness does not feel elevated. I just want to lay on the horn and yell.
Which is precisely why the author labels them unmanageable. The gridlock is the bitter soup. You cannot magically part the sea of cars, and you cannot dismantle the corporate bureaucracy that requires you to commute in the first place. The external reality is fixed. Your internal processing of that reality is the only place where you have true agency.
So if it's pouring rain, you can't magically make it sunny, but you can change your internal umbrella, so to speak. You have to change your consciousness.
Precisely.
But how? When life is actively throwing terrible things at you, when the system is forcing you to drink the bitter soup, or you're stuck in that gridlock, how exactly do you shift your mind so that the stress doesn't destroy your physical health, drain your mental wealth, and lock you back in a cage of frustration?
This is where the text reveals its master key, The most actionable tool in the entire philosophy is something called inverse thinking.
Inverse thinking.
Yeah. The author explains that when life is going smoothly, you use normal, conventional thinking. But when life is adverse, when the unmanageables are actively working against you, you must deploy inverse or upside-down thinking.
Upside down thinking. So you don't just try to grit your teeth and endure the bad situation. You actively flip the cognitive script on how you perceive it. How does that work mechanically?
The text uses a really brilliant metaphor here. It talks about turning yellow root, which is a notoriously bitter, highly unpleasant medicinal herb, into honey. Normal thinking says, this herb is bitter. It makes me suffer. I hate it. Inverse thinking says, the extreme bitterness of this herb is the exact mechanism that is currently curing my illness.
Oh, wow.
You take the thing that causes you acute discomfort, you reverse your psychological approach to it, and you extract sweetness or growth from the pain.
That makes so much sense.
Okay.
We usually talk about dealing with adversity by putting up an umbrella, but an umbrella just deflects the rain so you can endure it. You're still just hiding from the storm.
Exactly.
What inverse thinking describes is more like building a hydroelectric dam. You're taking the heavy, destructive, crushing force of the water coming down on you, and instead of just trying to survive it, you're intentionally running that pressure through a mental turbine to generate your own power.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
The hydroelectric dam is a perfect modern translation of the concept.
Mm-hmm.
You're converting the kinetic energy of the crisis into the fuel for your own spiritual health.
Mm.
If you lose your job, normal thinking spirals into a loss of mental wealth. Inverse thinking views the termination as the forceful destruction of a comfortable cage, forcefully pushing you into the blue sky you were too afraid to explore.
It's a radical cognitive reframing, but I do see a potential trap here.
What's that?
Well, if I'm constantly trying to build hydroelectric dams out of every single daily annoyance, and I'm hyperfixated on perfectly balancing all 9 elements of my health, wealth, and freedom, is there a risk of trying too hard? Can the pursuit of this perfect philosophical matrix actually backfire?
That is a great question, and the author actually provides a vital caveat at the very end of the text to address that exact danger.
Yeah.
It's the golden rule of moderation.
Moderation.
Yes, the text states clearly extremes meet and things reverse when pushed to the extreme. There's a fundamental law of balance woven into the universe. If you engage in the boundless, obsessive pursuit of health, wealth, and freedom without any limits, the blessing reverses.
The ultimate irony. The pursuit of the perfect life actually becomes a sickness if you obsess over it.
Precisely. If you grip the steering wheel too tightly, you crash the car. You want the engine to be perfectly tuned, but if you spend 24 hours a day obsessing over the spark plugs in the garage, you never actually go on the road trip.
Right.
You need just enough health, wealth, and freedom to experience the world deeply. If you become manic about acquiring them, you strangle the very life you're trying to live.
You have to seek it, but playfully, with limits.
Exactly.
So to bring this all together for you listening right now, to find that missing puzzle piece, you need to construct the vehicle. You need the tuned hardware of physical health, the ignition of mental software, and the fuel of a sustaining belief.
Yep.
You need the resources for the journey, not just material survival, but the mental sanctuary of true friends and the open blue sky of optimism. And you need the freedom to actually drive, to move, to speak, and to let your imagination roam without the shackles of fear.
Beautifully said.
And when you inevitably crash into the 18 unmanageable storms of life, you build a dam. You use inverse thinking to turn the bitter herbs into honey, all while remembering not to obsess over the map so much that you forget to look out the window.
It is a profound, comprehensive roadmap. But, it does leave us with a lingering, complex tension. I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on the architecture we've explored today.
Okay.
The text defines ultimate spiritual freedom as the ability to let your mind roam without fear, imagining things as beautifully as you want. But we also established that the 18 unmanageable things include the reality of other people and the systems we're forced to share.
And other people are, well, entirely unpredictable.
Exactly. So what happens when your boundless, beautiful imagination directly clashes with someone else's? Can absolute, perfect spiritual freedom truly exist in a world we have to share with 8 billion other people? Or is achieving a full life always going to fundamentally require compromising our beautiful personal blue sky to accommodate the reality of someone else's?
Wow, it's the ultimate tension between the freedom of the internal mind and the friction of the external world. A question to ponder long after this deep dive ends. Because perhaps finding the missing puzzle piece isn't about perfectly balancing your own board, but learning how to creatively navigate the messy, unmanageable reality of sharing the table with everyone else.